Marin sat in the cockpit of his small ship, the Wayfarer, surrounded by the quiet emptiness of space. Stars stretched endlessly in every direction, and the silence felt almost heavy. He had been drifting near the edge of a forgotten star system, waiting for the repair drones to finish fixing a minor fault in the engine. To him, this was routine. Space was wide, and things often broke. What mattered was patience and calm, and Marin had learned both after years of traveling alone. The Wayfarer was not large. It was an old human vessel, reliable but far from impressive. Its walls carried scratches from asteroid dust and faint burns from skirmishes long past. Marin was not a soldier anymore, just a traveler. He carried spare tools, crates of dried food, and an endless collection of stories about faraway worlds. Yet even in all his years of wandering, he had never expected the strange signal that reached him that day. It started as a faint pulse, almost like a heartbeat. The screen flickered with a weak distress code. At first, Marin thought it was only static, maybe the remnant of some old beacon. But then, a voice came through, soft and trembling. He could barely understand the words, but he felt the fear inside them. Someone was calling for help. Marin leaned forward, adjusting the receiver. The signal was weak, but it was real. His hands moved quickly over the controls, tracing the source of the transmission. It came from a broken ship drifting not far from the edge of a dead moon. He hesitated for a moment. In space, traps were common. Pirates often used false distress calls to lure the careless. But there was something in that voice, something raw and desperate, that pushed him to act. Guiding the Wayfarer closer, Marin's eyes caught sight of the vessel. It was not human. Its frame was long and narrow, colored with faded blue patterns that suggested a culture that cared about beauty even in machines. But the ship was damaged, badly. Panels hung loose, engines torn apart, and the hull scarred by burns. Life support was almost gone. He docked carefully, locking the air seals in place. The atmosphere reading was low but stable enough for a short crossing. Grabbing a small light and his emergency kit, Marin opened the hatch and stepped into the alien vessel. Inside, the air was cold, carrying the metallic taste of recycled oxygen. The lights flickered weakly, and silence filled the halls. He moved carefully, boots echoing against the floor. Every shadow felt heavy, and he half expected raiders to appear from around the corner. But instead of enemies, he found something he never imagined. At the end of the corridor, huddled together in a storage room, were a group of young alien girls. Their small frames were wrapped in simple garments, torn and worn from long days of struggle. Their skin carried soft colors, shades of pale silver and faint green that shimmered gently under the weak light. Their eyes were wide, bright, and filled with both fear and hope. When they saw him, they froze. They whispered to one another in their own tongue, voices quick and nervous. Then one of them, braver than the rest, stepped forward. She held her hands close to her chest, trembling, but her voice was clear enough to reach him. "Help us," she said. The words were broken, but they were human words. Marin stopped, surprised. He lowered his light, showing his empty hands. He had learned long ago that fear could be softened by calm gestures. Slowly, he knelt to their level, letting them see that he carried no weapon. "How many of you are here?" he asked gently. The girl looked back at the others, then counted softly. There were 6 in total, all of them younger than teenagers by human measure. Their faces carried exhaustion, and their thin arms showed the toll of hunger. "Our ship, broken," the girl explained in halting human speech. No food. No family. Only us. Marin felt the weight of her words. He could see it in their eyes, the truth of loss and the edge of despair. He asked no questions about how they came to be here, not yet. Instead, he opened his emergency kit, pulling out packets of water and dried ration bars. He offered them slowly, and though they hesitated at first, hunger soon overcame fear. The girls accepted the food with trembling hands, eating carefully as if afraid it might vanish. Once their breathing grew steadier, Marin spoke again. I am Marin. I travel alone. But I can help you, if you trust me. They looked at one another, whispering in their own language. Then the same brave girl nodded. We trust, she said softly. Marin studied them for a long moment. He had expected pirates or scavengers, not children stranded on a dying ship. Their presence stirred something inside him, something he had long thought dulled by years of wandering. He saw not just helpless strangers, but a chance to protect, to guide, to remind himself of the reason humans reached for the stars in the first place. He led them carefully back through the corridor, helping the smallest ones walk. The wayfarer's hatch opened, and the girls entered with wide eyes, staring at the human vessel. To them, it must have seemed strange, foreign, yet it was safe. Inside, Marin gave them blankets and let them rest in the spare cabin. The hum of his ship's systems was steady, warm compared to the silence of their ruined vessel. For the first time in what might have been many days, they slept without fear. Marin returned to the cockpit, watching the stars. His mind was heavy with questions. Who were these girls? What had happened to their world? And why had no one come for them? Yet as he looked back at the cabin door, he knew one thing with certainty. They had asked for help, and he had answered. And whatever lay ahead, he would see it through. The Wayfarer drifted silently through the emptiness of space. Its engines hummed softly, a steady rhythm that filled the cabins with life. Inside, Marin sat in the cockpit, staring at the endless black scattered with stars. He had brought the girls aboard only hours before, but the weight of their presence already pressed on him. He was used to quiet, to solitude, to having no one to answer to but himself. Now, 6 young lives rested under his roof, depending on him for safety. Behind the closed door of the spare cabin, faint whispers could be heard. The girls spoke in their own tongue, quick and musical, filled with tones that rose and fell like soft streams of water. Marin could not understand, yet he knew what they were doing. They were deciding whether to trust him. Finally, when the ship's internal clock marked the start of another cycle, the door slid open. The brave one from before stepped out. She was taller than the others, perhaps the oldest. Her silver skin reflected the cabin lights, and her deep green eyes carried both caution and strength. She approached Marin with careful steps, her hands held together as though steadying herself. Marin turned in his chair. You're awake. She nodded slowly. Her voice was quiet but firm. We talk. We tell you. He gestured to the seat beside him. She climbed up, sitting stiffly, her gaze darting between the control panels and the vast field of stars outside. What is your name? Marin asked gently. The girl hesitated, then spoke. Tira. Tira, he repeated, letting the name roll off his tongue. And the others. She listed them one by one, her words broken but clear enough: Lena, Suri, Maya, Nailai, and Vera. Each name carried a soft lilt, and Marin made sure to remember them. Tira pressed her hands against her knees. She took a breath, then began her story. We from small world. Green valleys, bright rivers. We live with family, many people. Life, simple, happy. Her voice faltered for a moment. Then raiders come. They burn. They take. We run. Our ship, only ship left. Not strong. Not fast. We escape, but not all. Families, gone. Marin's jaw tightened. He had heard stories like this before. Raiders swept through weak worlds, stripping them of resources and lives. They preyed on the helpless, leaving scars that lasted for generations. He thought he had left such tales behind when he walked away from soldiering, yet here it was again, staring him in the face. Tira continued. We fly. We hide. No food. No power. We send call. No one here. Only you. Her green eyes lifted, locking with his. Please help. Not only us. Others may be alive. In hiding. They wait. They need. Marin leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The words carried heavy weight. To step into this meant more than just feeding 6 starving children. It meant standing against raiders, against danger, against the same shadows he had sworn to avoid after leaving war behind. He could take them to the nearest station, hand them over to authorities, and walk away. That would be easy. That would be safe. But as he looked at Tira, and then at the cabin door where the others watched with wide, waiting eyes, he knew he could not turn his back. Still, he had to be careful. If I help, where do I take you? He asked. Tira's brow furrowed. She searched for words, then shook her head. Not no. Colony gone. Some may be in caves, mountains. But raiders there. Still there. Her voice cracked at the last word. She quickly turned her head, as though refusing to let him see her weakness. Marin's chest ached. These children carried burdens far too heavy for their age. He wanted to promise safety, to promise a future, but promises were fragile in the vast cruelty of space. Instead, he placed a hand gently on the console, choosing his words with care. I will see what I can do, he said. Tira's head turned back. The faintest glimmer of relief shone in her eyes. She nodded once, then lowered her gaze. For the next hours, Marin busied himself with repairs. The Wayfarer needed full strength if they were to travel near raider territory. He checked power lines, adjusted the jump drive, and refilled oxygen filters. As he worked, the girls slowly grew bolder. Lena, the smallest, wandered into the cockpit carrying a blanket draped around her shoulders. She looked at the stars with wide wonder, pointing at constellations Marin had never seen. Suri and Maya followed, whispering questions about the glowing buttons on the panels. Nalai and Vera clung to each other, curious yet shy. Marin found himself speaking more than usual, answering their simple questions. He showed them how the ship's controls guided direction, how the scanner searched for signals, how the engines pushed them forward. Their eyes lit with fascination, and for a while, their fear eased. As they sat around him, he opened a storage box and pulled out food packs. He shared them evenly, teaching them how to tear the seal and add a bit of water to soften the dry meal. The girls laughed softly when the steam rose, delighted by the strange human rations. During the quiet meal, Tira spoke again. Why you help? Marin paused, staring at his own food pack. Why indeed? He had no obligation, no reward waiting at the end. He could have ignored the signal, moved on, left the wreck to drift into the dark. But he had not. "Because you asked," he said simply. "Because you needed." The girls exchanged looks, whispering among themselves. Then Maya smiled, a small fragile smile that warmed the cold cabin. "Human heart strong," she said in broken words. That night, if one could call it night in the timeless sea of space, Marin sat alone at the controls. The girls slept in the cabin, curled under blankets, their breathing soft and even. He listened to the hum of the engines, but his mind wandered. He thought of his own past, of battles fought in nameless systems, of comrades lost. He had sworn never again to take sides, never again to risk his life for causes beyond his reach. Yet now, without planning, without choice, he had stepped into something larger. He wondered if this was humanity's true strength, not weapons, not ships, not technology, but the simple refusal to walk away when someone begged for help. The stars glimmered outside, silent witnesses to his thoughts. Marin set a new course, one that edged closer to the region Tira had described. The journey would not be safe, but safety was no longer his priority. When morning cycle came, the girls woke to find him at the controls, charting the route. Tira's eyes widened when she saw the path. "You go?" she asked. "Yes," Marin said firmly. "We go." The room filled with soft gasps, then quiet smiles. The weight of fear still hung over them, but hope had taken root. And in that moment, Marin knew there was no turning back. The Wayfarer moved quietly across the stars, its engines carrying it toward the sector Tira had spoken of. The small ship was not built for war, not built for rescue missions, but it was steady, reliable, and under Marin's hands it became more than a machine. It became a bridge between a lone human and 6 young alien girls who now depended on him. The girls had settled into the spare cabin, but as days passed, they began to explore the rest of the ship. Their fear of Marin slowly faded. Curiosity replaced it. Every corner of the Wayfarer seemed new and strange to them, every piece of human technology a small wonder. One morning, Marin found Lena sitting in the storage bay, staring at an old toolbox. She tilted her head, touching the smooth metal carefully. "That's a wrench," Marin explained, kneeling beside her. He picked it up and showed how it tightened bolts. Lena's eyes widened as if he had just revealed a secret of the universe. Suri and Maya often followed him to the cockpit, pointing at the navigation screens and asking endless questions in broken human words. Marin, patient though not used to teaching, answered each one. He showed them how stars were marked on maps, how distances were measured, and how signals were tracked. He noticed how quickly they learned, how eager they were to understand. Nalai and Vera, the quietest of the group, spent their time near the window ports. They sat together, staring at the endless dark sea outside, whispering softly in their own language. Their faces often carried sadness, but when Marin joined them and pointed out clusters of stars, they smiled faintly, as though comforted by his presence. Tira, the oldest, stayed close to him the most. She wanted to know more about his kind, about why humans traveled, about how they built ships. Her questions were thoughtful, heavy for someone so young, but Marin answered with honesty. He told her that humans explored because they were always searching for more, searching for better. Sometimes that search led to wonders, sometimes to mistakes. But humans never stopped moving forward. One evening, as the ship drifted in calm space, Marin gathered them in the mess hall. He placed a small box on the table and opened it. Inside were ration packs, but this time he added something special: small packets of dried fruit from a distant colony world. He had kept them for himself, rare treats he rarely touched, but now he offered them to the girls. Their faces lit with joy as they tasted the sweetness. Laughter filled the room, soft but pure, echoing against the metal walls. For a brief time, the ship felt less like a vessel drifting in a dangerous galaxy and more like a home. Later that night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Marin sat in the cockpit, lost in thought. He realized how quickly they had become part of his days. The silence that once felt natural now seemed strange without their voices. The weight of their trust pressed heavily on him, but it also gave him strength. The journey was not without risk. Twice they had to alter their path to avoid suspicious signals on the scanner. Once they passed near the wreck of another ship, its hull torn apart by raider fire. Marin did not let the girls see it, guiding the wayfarer quietly past, his jaw set tight. He knew the galaxy was cruel, but he wanted to shield them from more pain if he could. During the long hours, Marin began teaching them survival skills. He showed them how to check oxygen levels, how to seal a suit, how to use basic tools. The girls practiced eagerly. Tira learned fastest, her steady hands making quick work of the tasks. Even the younger ones listened carefully, determined to prove they were not helpless. One afternoon, while repairing a loose panel in the engine bay, Marin let the girls help. Lena held the light steady while Suri fetched tools. Maya watched closely, asking questions about each wire and bolt. By the time the work was done, the girls beamed with pride. They had helped keep the ship alive. That night, as they sat around the table, Tira spoke softly. "You teach us. You share. Why?" Marin thought for a moment. "Because one day, you may need to do these things yourselves. You must be ready. Strength is not only in fighting. Strength is in knowing, in preparing, in building." The girls nodded, their young faces serious. They understood. Days passed, and the bond grew deeper. The girls began to trust not only his protection but his guidance. They no longer saw him as a stranger. To them, Marin became something more: a protector, a teacher, a reminder that kindness still existed in the galaxy. As the wayfarer drew closer to the region of their colony, tension returned. The scanners picked up faint trails of raider patrols. Marin grew cautious, checking every signal twice. He dimmed the ship's outer lights, keeping their path as quiet as possible. One evening, while the stars shifted outside the windows, Marin gathered the girls in the cockpit. He wanted them to understand the danger ahead. "Your home," he said slowly, choosing simple words they could follow, "is close. But raiders are close too. We must be careful. We must be quiet. Do you understand?" Tira translated quickly to the younger ones. They listened with wide eyes, nodding. Fear flickered in their faces, but so did determination. "We understand," Tira said firmly. Marin looked at them, one by one. He saw their courage, fragile but real. And in that moment, he felt a surge of resolve. He was not just carrying passengers. He was carrying the last hope of a broken world. That night, as the ship drifted quietly, Marin found himself sitting near the cabin door, listening to the girls talk in their own tongue. Though he could not understand the words, he could hear the rhythm, the rise and fall of their voices. They were making plans, perhaps dreaming of what they would do if their world could be rebuilt. The sound gave him strength, reminding him why he had chosen this path. When morning cycle came, Tira approached him with a piece of cloth. It was small, woven with faded patterns of blue and green. She held it out with both hands. "This from our home," she explained. "We keep it. We share it with you. You help us. You protect us. So now you part of us." Marin accepted the cloth with quiet respect. It was light in his hands, but it carried the weight of trust, of belonging. He folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. "Thank you," he said. The journey continued. Ahead lay danger, but also the chance of hope. The girls no longer begged with desperate voices. Instead, they stood beside him, ready to face whatever waited. And Marin, once a wanderer drifting without purpose, felt something he had not felt in years. He felt needed. He felt human. The wayfarer glided through the shadows of space, silent and small against the endless dark. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. Marin sat at the controls, eyes fixed on the scanner. The display showed faint signals ahead, raider ships, just as he expected. They were spread like hunters across the system, waiting for anyone who dared to return. Behind him, the 6 alien girls gathered quietly. Tira stood closest, her hand gripping the edge of the chair. The others huddled together, their wide eyes fixed on the shifting lights of the scanner. "They are here," Tira whispered. "Yes," Marin said firmly. "But we are not afraid. We are smart. And smart is stronger than fear." The girls looked at him, searching his face. His calm voice steadied them. He did not smile, but his eyes held determination, and that was enough. The first patrol ship appeared on the edge of sight. It was larger than the Wayfarer, its black hull marked with harsh symbols. Its engines glowed red, and weapons hung heavy beneath its wings. Compared to it, Marin's vessel looked fragile, but he knew appearances were not everything. He dimmed his ship's lights, pulling them close to a drifting asteroid. The raider ship passed slowly, scanning, but it did not notice them. When it moved on, Marin let out a quiet breath. The girls whispered in relief, their fear loosening for a moment. But the real test came as they neared the orbit of the ruined colony. There, 3 raider cruisers circled like vultures. Their presence was heavy, their shadows falling over the broken world below. The girls gasped when they saw the image on the screen. Their home, once green and bright, now scarred by fire. The colony's surface bore black marks where towns once stood. Smoke still rose from parts of it, though faint and distant. Nalai and Vera clutched each other, their eyes wet. Maya covered her mouth. Even Tira's strong voice faltered as she whispered, "Our world." Marin did not let the sight break him. His hands moved across the controls with steady focus. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "We cannot fight them head-on. They are too many, too strong. But they believe they own this space. They believe no one dares to stand against them. That belief is their weakness." Tira frowned, confused. "What can we do?" Marin leaned forward, eyes sharp. "We outthink them." He began to explain his plan. The Wayfarer was small, faster in short bursts, and able to hide in places larger ships could not. The raiders expected enemies to attack with power. Instead, he would use speed, tricks, and the emptiness of space itself. The girls listened, their fear slowly turning to a spark of hope. The first step was distraction. Marin guided the Wayfarer into the shadow of a broken satellite. From there, he sent out a false signal, a faint echo of distress, bouncing it across the system. One of the raider ships picked it up and turned to investigate, moving away from the others. "Good," Marin murmured. One less to watch us. He slipped the Wayfarer lower, close to the planet's orbit. But another raider patrol cut across their path, scanning fiercely. Marin's heart pounded, but his hands stayed steady. He shut down most systems, leaving only life support and minimal thrusters. The ship drifted like space debris, cold and silent. The raider passed within sight, its scanner sweeping dangerously close. Inside the cabin, the girls held their breath. The silence was so deep that Marin could hear the soft tremble of Lena's hands clutching her blanket. The scanner beam slid past, then faded. The raider moved on, fooled by the act. Only when it was gone did Marin restart the systems. The girls exhaled at once, whispering in awe. You tricked them, Suri said, her eyes shining. Marin gave a small nod. Sometimes survival is not about strength. It is about patience. But patience alone would not be enough. To reach the colony, he had to get past the cruisers still circling above. Direct confrontation was unavoidable now. He turned to Tira. Hold the others steady. Whatever happens, stay together. Tira nodded firmly, her young face set with courage. Marin powered the engines. The Wayfarer shot forward, breaking from the asteroid's cover. The nearest raider cruiser immediately turned, its weapons locking on. Energy blasts streaked across space, bright lines of fire. The girls cried out, clinging to each other. But Marin was ready. He rolled the ship hard to the side, diving into a cluster of floating wreckage. The blast struck only metal fragments, scattering them into sparks. The raider pursued, but Marin twisted the ship through the debris, weaving paths so narrow the larger cruiser could not follow. He darted in and out, using the wreckage as a shield. The cruiser fired wildly, its blasts wasting against broken hulls. Hold tight, Marin warned. He cut the engines suddenly, letting the cruiser overshoot. Then, in one swift move, he reignited the thrusters, shooting upward behind its path. For a brief moment, the small Wayfarer hovered in the cruiser's blind spot. Marin aimed his own weapons not strong, but precise. He fired a concentrated burst at the cruiser's engine vents. The strike was small compared to the cruiser's size, but it hit the right place. Sparks burst across its rear, and the ship lurched, slowing. Cheers rose from the girls. Their voices filled the cabin with joy, but Marin stayed sharp. Not done yet. Another raider cruiser closed in, firing. The Wayfarer jolted as a blast grazed its side, alarms ringing. Marin gritted his teeth, steadying the ship. He dove toward the planet's atmosphere, drawing the cruiser after him. The thin air rattled the hull as they schemed the edge of the sky. Clouds and smoke blurred below, but Marin's focus never wavered. He guided the Wayfarer into a dive, then suddenly pulled up, forcing the heavy cruiser to follow. The raider was too large, too slow to climb as sharply. It scraped against the atmosphere, flames licking its hull. With a roar of engines, it broke away, damaged and retreating. Inside the cabin, the girls clapped and shouted, their fear turning into excitement. They looked at Marin with awe, their eyes shining. You beat them, Maya cried. Not yet, Marin said, his voice steady but fierce. But they know now. A human stands in their way. The last cruiser, seeing its partners damaged, hesitated. Raiders were bold when their prey was weak, but when faced with unexpected resistance, they often scattered. True to form, the remaining ship turned, retreating toward the edge of the system. Silence filled the cabin. The scanners cleared. The space above the colony was theirs. The girls erupted into cheers, hugging one another, their voices rising in joy. Even Tira, usually calm, smiled brightly, her eyes wet with relief. Marin leaned back in his chair, letting out a deep breath. His hands trembled slightly, but his face remained calm. He had done what few would dare, stood against raiders with nothing but a small ship and determination. He turned to the girls. "It is safe now. We can land." They looked at him as though he were more than human, as though he were a force greater than the raiders themselves. And perhaps, in their eyes, he was. The wayfarer descended slowly toward the wounded world below. For the first time since fleeing their home, the alien girls saw their skies again. Smoke still rose, ruins still marked the land, but this was their home. And because of one human's courage, they had returned. The wayfarer descended slowly through the heavy clouds. The once bright skies of the colony were filled with gray smoke that rose from burned forests and shattered towns. Below, wide valleys stretched out, scarred by fire and blackened soil. Rivers that once sparkled were now choked with ash. Inside the cockpit, silence filled the cabin. The 6 alien girls pressed their faces against the viewing ports, their eyes wide with sorrow. For the first time since they had escaped, they saw their home again. But instead of joy, pain settled in their hearts. Marin glanced at them, then returned his gaze to the controls. His hands were steady, but his chest felt heavy. He had seen ruined worlds before, too many to count. Yet watching these children see the scars of their home cut deeper than any memory. Tira's voice broke the silence. It was green. It was full of light. Now, her words faded, unable to carry the weight of loss. Marin placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It can be green again. But first, we must see who remains." The wayfarer touched down on a flat stretch of ground near the edge of a ruined settlement. The landing gear sank slightly into the burned soil. When the hatch opened, a rush of smoky air swept inside. The girls stepped out slowly, their feet touching home soil once more. The town before them was broken. Houses lay in ruins, walls collapsed, roofs shattered. Ash covered the streets. But as they walked cautiously, faint movement stirred. From the shadows of broken walls, figures emerged. Survivors. At first, they were cautious, their thin faces filled with suspicion. But when they saw the girls, their expressions shifted. Cries of recognition rang out. Families rushed forward, voices breaking with relief. "Nailai!" Vera, a woman shouted, tears streaming down her face as she pulled the 2 youngest girls into her arms. Suri and Maya were embraced by older men who had searched for them for days. Lena was lifted into the arms of a weary figure who laughed and cried at once. Even Tira, who had carried herself with strength for so long, finally let her guard fall as an elder ran to her, clutching her close. Marin stood back, watching. The reunion was raw, filled with tears and trembling hands, but it was proof that hope had survived. Not all had been taken. Some had hidden, waiting for a chance to come back into the light. When the first storm of emotions calmed, the survivors turned to Marin. Their eyes studied him, this lone human who had brought their children home. Words passed among them in their own tongue, soft and respectful. Finally, the elder stepped forward, bowing slightly. "You brought them back," Tira translated. "You gave us hope again. We thank you." Marin shook his head. "I only did what anyone should do." But the way they looked at him said otherwise. To them, he was not only a rescuer. he was proof that kindness still existed beyond their world, that not every traveler in the stars came with greed and fire. The days that followed were filled with work. Marin stayed to help the survivors rebuild what little they could. He guided them in repairing broken shelters, shared his supplies, and taught them ways to purify water and restore power. The girls stayed close to him, learning, helping, their spirits brighter now that they were no longer alone. At night, fires burned in the center of the ruined town. The survivors gathered, sharing stories, singing soft songs in their flowing language. The girls sat near Marin, translating when they could. They spoke of the past, of the beauty of their valleys, of the laughter that once filled their halls. They also spoke of the raiders, of the scars left behind, and of the strength needed to rise again. Marin listened quietly. He knew the road ahead for them would not be easy. But he also knew they carried a strength deeper than fear. They had survived. And survival was the first step toward rebuilding. One evening, Tira came to him with the small woven cloth she had given before. She sat beside him by the fire, her green eyes reflecting the flames. "You gave us more than safety," she said softly. "You gave us courage. We thought all was lost. But you showed us that even one can stand against many." Marin looked at the cloth, then at her. "I only reminded you of what you already had inside. Courage is not given. It is found." Tira smiled faintly. "Maybe. But without you, we would not have found it in time." The next morning, Marin began preparing the wayfarer. His supplies were running low, and his journey could not stay paused forever. The survivors understood. They gathered near the ship, watching as he checked the engines. The girls stood together, their faces troubled. "You leave?" Lena asked, her small voice trembling. Marin crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Yes. But you are not alone anymore. You have your people. You have your home." "But we need you," Suri said, clutching his sleeve. Marin smiled softly. "You do not need me forever. You are stronger than you know. You will grow. You will build. And when the stars frighten you, remember there was once a human who stood with you." The girls' eyes filled with tears, but they nodded. They understood, even if it hurt. Before he left, the elder approached once more. He placed his hands over Marin's, speaking slowly. Tira translated, her voice steady. "He says you are always welcome here. Our world will remember your name. When we tell our children how we survived, we will tell them of the human who answered our call." Marin bowed his head. He did not seek praise, but he accepted their gratitude with respect. When the hatch of the wayfarer closed, the girls stood outside, waving. Their voices rose in farewell, calling his name. Tira's eyes shone with pride, not sorrow, as she lifted the woven cloth high, a symbol of their bond. The engines roared softly, and the ship lifted into the sky. The ruined land fell away beneath it, replaced by clouds, then by the endless stars. In the cockpit, Marin sat quietly, watching the world shrink behind him. He thought of the girls, of their courage, of the way their voices had filled his silent ship. He thought of the survivors, fragile but unbroken. For years, he had wandered without purpose, a traveler drifting between forgotten systems. Now, for the first time, he felt his journey had meaning. Not because of victories or battles, but because he had chosen not to turn away. He touched the pocket of his jacket, feeling the woven cloth inside. A reminder of trust. A reminder of hope. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, full of unknown paths and distant worlds. Marin smiled faintly to himself. Humanity's strength, he realized, was not in its ships or weapons. It was in the simple truth that even one person could make a difference. And somewhere behind him, on a scarred but living world, 6 young girls and their people would always remember the human who had stood beside them. The wayfarer vanished into the deep, carrying Marin toward new horizons, but his legacy remained a legacy written not in stone or steel, but in hearts that would never forget.